Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Komet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hi, Scott.
Hey, Jason. How you doing this week?
It's going all right. The days are getting a bit shorter and it's dark out when we're recording this. Usually a couple weeks back, it would have been still light out, but hey, we're getting to that time of year.
Yeah. At least we've had a couple nice sunsets, though. That I really appreciate those.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So if you are a new listener to the podcast, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about, Scott?
So we focus on soccer in Calgary at the amateur, collegiate, and professional levels. We talk about the teams and the players from the city's soccer community, from the grassroots and amateur leagues up to the university and professional level.
We're going to dive into League One Alberta, the final matches. We're going to talk a little bit about the Whitecaps, as a local Calgarian, Sam Adekugbe, has signed with them. We'll also go over the Cavs match last week against their bogey team, Ottawa. Preview the Forge match, which is on Friday evening, which is, by the time this gets released, it'll be that day.
That sounds great. And as usual, we have, not just one interview, but two interviews this episode, both of which were kind of shorter than our typical interviews. But yeah, lots of content and another jam-packed agenda. I'm excited to get into it.
Let's start with the biggest Calgary soccer story of the week, in my opinion at least, would be that the city swept the League One Alberta finals. On the men's side, Foothills comfortably beat St. Albert 3-0 at Broadview. And on the women's side, the match was in St. Albert and it all went down to penalties and the Blizzard was able to pull it out in the shootout.
Yeah, and it was kind of a surprise hero, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, who kind of won the shootout for Blizzard. But it looks like Calgary came out on top in the League One Battle of Alberta, if you want to call it that, between Calgary and Edmonton, and in both the women's and the men's leagues this year. So congrats to those two teams. In my opinion, the men's league kind of felt like a foregone conclusion. Foothills seemed to be the top team throughout the campaign, and they really looked comfortable in that final. You and I were both there watching. On the women's side, though, it was a really impressive result for Blizzard to upset the Impact, especially considering the game was in St. Albert, as you mentioned. And I'm sure for those players, it was an exciting night and an achievement they'll remember for a long time, getting to be League One Alberta's inaugural champion, even though it is, of course, an exhibition series this year.
I would agree with your statement about the Foothills on the men's side. Like when we were watching that match, I don't know, I didn't really ever feel like the match was really ever in doubt. It was, they had firm control of it, and it didn't seem like St. Albert was really, they would be able to have the ability to come back. But yeah, the matchup in St. Albert sounds like it was really close and exciting. But yeah, congrats to both teams.
Yeah. So the men's, like you mentioned in the men's game, Foothills won 3-0. So clean sheet, pretty comfortable game. They scored early with a penalty kick from Moel Gandor, who some listeners may remember was a Cavalry U Sports draft pick. And he's also a star player for the Mount Royal University Cougars. And they went up 2-0 before the half on a goal from Charles Nana. So they seemed to be in control for most of it. And Nana scored a second goal, a nicer one than his first, I thought, in the second half to really seal the win for Foothills. He, in general, had a great performance for Foothills and got 2 of their goals and was deservedly named man of the match.
Yeah, and we had a chance to talk to him immediately after the match, did a short interview. We're going to run it now. The first 45 seconds to a minute or so, there's a bunch of background music, but because after all, they were celebrating the victory, but it does stop after that. And I think for the most part, the audio quality is listenable. So let's run it now.
First and foremost, congratulations. How does it feel to end the inaugural exhibition League One series with the gold medal and player of the game honors?
It feels amazing, honestly. We kept our standards very high the whole season, and we secured our spot in the final very early, so it would have been disappointing to come here and not get the job done in the end. But we were able to get the job done in the end, and thankfully I was able to help my team and score a couple goals.
Yeah, and having home field always helps, right? Home field advantage. What would it mean to you and your teammates to play at Broadview today rather than in St. Albert?
It just means like we see the amount of people that we brought out, we can't let them down. down, it means you have to at least put in 100% effort because you have to reward them for coming and showing up. And then when you put that effort in, hopefully the rest comes because we have very good players on our team and the quality is going to show and shine through.
Yeah. Going up early with the penalty definitely helps, right? It gives you lets everybody relax a little bit, but I don't know. I mean, overall, do you feel like the game was in Foothills' control tonight?
Having that 1-goal advantage early, it helps us kind of settle in and not take risks in the back, but play more, kind of not be afraid to play out of the back because then even you have that 1-goal cushion and you feel safer. Whereas if it's 0-0 the whole way, that one giveaway, they're up 1-0 and then they're just going to sit and park the bus. So it's nice having that 1-goal cushion, and then it helps you push through. Even though they did pile on a lot of pressure early in the second half, we were able to get that 3rd goal and secure the game.
Are you from Calgary?
Yes.
Yeah. And you play for, is it Trinity Western during the university season? Are you still playing with them? Like, are you going to Langley pretty soon?
I'm going back next Thursday, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, so out of here pretty soon.
Nice. What season will that be for you?
This will be my 3rd esports season, but my 4th year at the school. My first year was the COVID.
Okay. And growing up in Calgary, which club were you with?
I started off at NSD when I was younger.
Yeah.
And I moved to Foothills. Actually, I went Southwest for a bit, and then I moved to Foothills pretty early, I think 12 years old, and I've been at Foothills ever since.
Okay. What year are you? Are you like a 2000?
I'm in 2002.
2002?
Yes, sir.
Last thoughts about League One or playing for Foothills this summer?
No, I think the standard that we have on our team is actually very high. So not even just the games, like the training sessions that we have here at Foothills. It's honestly, it's a blessing to be able to be a part of this team. And I'm excited to see League One grow, especially in Alberta, because it's very big in BC and Ontario. I'm excited to see it grow in Alberta, but yeah. No, very good.
Are you hoping to play in like CPL after university? Are you?
God willing, we'll see where the road takes me. Hopefully.
Right on. Well, congratulations again. Thanks for answering our questions.
Of course, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Well, thanks to Charles Nana for doing the interview. And I got to say, I was quite impressed with him. And I think he's somebody that we should be keeping an eye on in the future.
I think so too. He was playing out on the wing, and yet he was just constantly making things happen for Foothills. He's a bit older than I actually thought he was. He's either 20 or 21, depending on when his birthday is. He mentioned in that interview he's a 2002 born player. But no, he's with Trinity Western in U Sports, and obviously has played more than one season with Foothills. So I don't know. I mean, if he plays like he did in that final, if he was playing like that throughout the rest of the season, you have to think he's on somebody's radar, whether it's Cavalry or another CPL team. He definitely looked ready for that level.
He definitely looked good out there, and I would agree. I think he's somebody who, based on that performance at least, he's someone that we should pay attention to, and I would not be shocked to see him playing at a higher level in the near future. As we mentioned, there was a lot more drama up in St. Albert, where they played 120 minutes, and they could not break the 1-1 deadlock. So it went to PKs, and the Blizzard was able to secure the victory in the 7th round of the kicks when Lauren Houghton walked up to the spot and scored, and then she went into the net and saved the next PK, and that's how they won it.
Yeah, so this is a game I wish I could have watched because, yeah, it seems like there was a lot more excitement in it compared to the men's game. Yeah, Houghton the hero, I guess, would be the headline if I were writing a match recap about it. But she definitely showed nerves of steel to take a shot in the shootout and then also and do her job in stopping the kick. Kudos to you, Jason. You went out and got an interview with Lauren, who, you know, I don't know if you remember Euro 2004 when Portugal's goalkeeper, I believe Ricardo was his name, very similar story of both scoring in the shootout and then saving a shot. And I remember he took his gloves off, which I think rattled. They were playing England, if I recall correctly, and yeah, that's what Houghton's kind of performance reminded me of.
Yeah, I actually don't know that story. It seems like that's something I would have heard about and previously, but yeah, that's sounds very similar to what happened. So anyway, good honor. And as you mentioned, I had a chance to interview her for a few minutes. So let's run an interview now, and she can go into a little bit further detail about everything that happened last week. I'd like to welcome Lauren Houghton to the podcast. She was the goalkeeper for the championship Calgary Blizzard side that won the League One championship up in St. Albert last week. Thanks for joining us, Lauren.
Of course, happy to be here. Happy to have a chat.
I'm going to let you do this and talk us through, because what I understand is there was a lot of interesting drama at the end of your match involving penalty kicks and that sort of thing. So you just want to run us through exactly what had happened?
Yeah, of course. So this is our third time playing St. Albert this season. Every time it's a very physical, very feisty game. Both teams are very talented, very committed to winning. So the whole game, it was back and forth, a lot of tackles, a lot of challenges, very, very competitive game. So we end the 90 minutes all tied up 1-1. We go into extra time, obviously 2 15-minute periods. In that time, St. Albert's awarded a penalty. I saved that one. So game still tied 1-1. Not a ton more chances. So we had to PKs. Obviously, it's never a great way to end a game, let alone a championship. But, my team was very committed, told the girls before the penalty kicks, if you miss, you miss. But just know ahead of time what you want to do, where you want to place the ball, and don't second guess yourself. Just be confident and, win together, lose together. This was our team's greatest performance. And so the girls were pretty confident going into it. We ended up getting the opportunity to kick first, which I always find is the biggest reason why teams win. Just you set the standards. And unfortunately we missed our first one, but not to worry. We were able to come back. I saved 3 of the 7. My coach tells me, hey, you're going to take our 7th kick. Never really taken a penalty before. I usually try to avoid them as best as I can. But as a captain, I step forward, and goalkeepers are pretty decent penalty kick takers just because we know the flip side. We know where to aim and that kind of thing. So I step up, I take the 7th, I score. And now it's my responsibility to end the game and save their penalty. And so I do. And that was a pretty great feeling to know that I scored the winner and then ended up saving what could have been their equalizer. But no, it was a pretty dramatic way to end. I'll give you that. But I was proud of the team as a whole, and the girls who stepped up and took a penalty. It's pretty brave.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I was going to be the next question I was going to ask you is if you had ever done this before, like you'd ever actually in a competitive match ever had to take a PK, and it sounds like you haven't. Is that right?
Yeah, never in a competitive match. When I was 12 at ASA, we did penalties after a game for no reason, and I ended up hitting the crossbar on the 5th kick, but never in a competitive game that matters. I've never taken one before.
And is it something you've ever like goofed around in practice and done a little bit of it, but probably not really even that much of that, I would guess?
Honestly, no. I've never even thought about doing them at practice when the girls are practicing their penalties. I've always just stayed on my side in the goal, and I've never even considered it. Obviously, if it gets to 11 shooters, the goalkeepers have to shoot anyways. So I kind of have the idea of where I want to go, but the odds of it getting to the 11th shooter is pretty slim. But yeah, Diogo came up to me and he said, you're shooting 7th, win us the game. And I tried my best, and I guess it worked out.
Any other thoughts about this League One season, the first season of this? When you win a championship, I guess that always puts a pretty positive spin on the season. But what do you think of the organization and the quality of play in general?
Yeah, so the championship, like you said, obviously makes it a pretty great season in total. But I think as a whole, this league is designed really well. It's ideally for university players before they have to head back. And I'd say 99% of my team are current university players or about to go to university, with me and a couple others being the exclusions. But it's a great league as it ends right before preseason, so that girls go into preseason already ready to play, already competing at a high level, and they're ready to go. As for the competition, it was really classy. Like every team had a great tactical set up. You could tell the identities of the teams, what they represented, and obviously there are university players, so skill level was very, very competitive. It's just a step up from Major League, where maybe you have a little bit lower commitment from some players. No, this League One has super high commitment, and Diogo and Cedric had a good program going where they understood that League One took, a lot of these girls' summers. So they'd give us opportunities to go away with family, which was nice. And yeah, I think as a whole, League One is just a great setup for these university players to stay fit in the off season.
Last question I have for you is what's next for you? Are you pursuing other opportunities right now? Anything you can talk about, or what's the plan?
Yeah. So before League One started, after I had graduated university, I went and spent 1 year in Iceland playing professionally. So I already have a year of pro under my belt, and came back to do this summer. But now I'm looking for something else, chatting with an agent, talking to clubs myself, that kind of thing, seeing what I can get. Ideally, I'd like to go somewhere soon. It's just difficult with the Women's World Cup. All of the seasons are on hold right now, or they're being pushed back for their start date by a little bit. So just kind of playing the waiting game. But yeah, I'd love to go play overseas somewhere. A couple friends are in Australia. It'd be fun to go play with them. I'd love to go back to Europe. Probably on the mainland this time, but yeah, looking for something new. Nothing really in the works right now, but definitely keeping some options open.
Well, excellent. We'll be following along with interest, and all the best. And thanks for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks again to Lauren Houghton for taking time to do the interview. I really wanted to see if we could get her on this week because I just think this is such a cool story and it hasn't really been covered too much. So I wanted to make sure that we had a chance to give it a little bit of attention. It was pretty cool. It was great she made the time on short notice. Appreciate it.
For sure. Yeah. Thanks to Lauren for doing the interview.
Last thing I want to talk about with League One, I just thought I would do a very brief rundown. I was just kind of curious and I started playing around and Googling around a little bit. I wanted to mention where some of these players are going from there. If you look at the Foothills men's championship team, out of 22 players on the team, 18 of them are going back to school. Of those 18, 10 of them are going to a Calgary school, which is either the Dinos, Mount Royal, or State. 5 more are staying within Canada West. As we mentioned, Nana is going to be at Trinity Western. Their starting keeper, Liam Collins, I believe, is going to be with Alberta. Marcus Kaiser is going to UBC. There's a few players that are going off to Cape Breton, including Max Peatgrass, who had a cup of coffee with the Cavs a couple years back. On that team, there's one NCAA Division I player, and that's Malik Sylvester, and he's playing for Oakland University, which is in the Detroit area. For the Blizzard, at least 14 of them that I could track down are going back to school. 7 are with the Dinos, which kind of makes sense when you consider the existing connections with the coaching staff between Blizzard and Dinos. 4 more are staying in Canada West. They're going to be in places like UBC, McEwen, and Saskatchewan. 3 members of that team for sure are playing in the NCAA. The Schneider sisters are both at the University of Maine, and Lauren Tran plays for St. John's in New York City. There are a lot of players that you can be watching in Canada West action this fall.
Yeah, and Kaylee Hunter, I think as we talked about last week, went to the Whitecaps, and that's crazy. She's a 2007 or 2008 born, which would make her 15 or 16, and she was excelling in League One until she got that move. So that's another name I think people should try to remember for the near future.
Yeah, I think we're going to be hearing a lot more from her. I believe that when we talked before about Maya Jones, she was kind of in the same scenario where she was playing at 15, 16, already with players several years older than her. And, she's become, at this point, I'd say, on the fringes of making the national teams. So she's definitely one to watch as well.
Yeah, we could see her play for Foothills WFC perhaps if depending on how it goes with Whitecaps. But no, Kaylee Hunter, remember that name. And then on the men's side, I mean, that I was surprised by how many were in the university level. I guess that makes sense though, and it'll be interesting to see on the men's side if any of those players will maybe be in the U Sports CPL draft next year, or if a few of them are going to be signed by CPL clubs. I know a few of them have been around the pro league already. There's a couple of players in there, as we've kind of talked about, who were with Cavalry. Yeah, it's a good level of soccer. I mean, there was an okay crowd there last Friday. I think you and I, it was our first League One game. And I mean, the level's great, right? So if you're a soccer fan in Calgary, and I mean, it's over now, but next spring, if it works out in terms of your schedule, make sure to get out to a League One game. It's pretty good soccer.
It is good soccer.
And I know we're going to talk a lot more about U Sports soccer in future episodes, but the schedule has been released, and it's very intriguing that the Crowchild Classic between the University of Calgary and Mount Royal University is the very first game of the season coming up later this week.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a future podcast topic for sure. Let's move on to, of all things, Major League Soccer. I believe this is our 19th episode. I don't think we've ever spent any significant amount of time on Major League Soccer thus far, but I think the events of this week sort of warrant us adding it into the mix. Sam Adekugbe, who I think most of you are aware of, is from Calgary, and he's been plying his trade throughout Europe, most recently in Turkey. He's been transferred to the Whitecaps, and it sounds like apparently the deal was for about $1 million transfer fee, and yeah, he's back in Canada with the Whitecaps.
Yeah, it's a really good bit of business from Whitecaps, who also, I believe, picked up Richie Larea. I don't know if that was on loan or if it was a permanent deal, but
it's a loan with an option to buy, I think.
Okay, all right. Well, but yeah, going back to Sam, I think a lot of our listeners know he started his pro career with the Whitecaps back in 2014, moved there from Calgary at a fairly young age. I think there are going to be Canadian fans, especially like national team fans, who were maybe a bit disappointed to learn he's leaving the Turkish league, which is a pretty high level league, to come back to MLS. I was wondering if maybe the earthquake had anything to do with this, and like a desire to return closer to home. Maybe I'm way off with that, but it did come to my mind when I learned that he'd left Turkey to return to Canada.
I believe on Twitter I saw, I might get the name wrong, but Manuel Veth, I believe his name is. He's with Transfer Market, and he covers a lot of stuff happening in North America. In one of his tweets from yesterday, he made a comment that Sam was very eager to return to Canada. So that was part of the whole thing, because apparently his Turkish club and the Whitecaps negotiations were tough negotiations, but apparently part of what he said in that tweet was that Adekugbe really did want to come back to Canada, which was sort of making both sides want to make it happen. And if that's related to the earthquake, I don't know, but it's possible, I guess.
And I mean, but it's close to home. His family's still in Calgary, like his parents, and he'll probably be a fan favorite on Vancouver, if only for some of the stuff he's done with Canada over the years. But he's been away from home for a long time. He's played in England and he's played in Turkey, so could be just time for him to come home. He's probably at the prime of his career in terms of his age. I think he's probably 27, maybe 28.
I think he's 28 someplace I read, but yeah, right. You're right in that range. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because he's a 1995 born. But no, good. Like I said, a really good bit of business for the Whitecaps, and $1 million fee is pretty great to see that for a Canadian.
Okay, well, let's move on to the Cavs. And as we usually do, we kind of do the usual weekly update, the review and the preview. So let's talk about that loss in Ottawa last Saturday afternoon. It was a 1-0 loss, and I think this does cement the suggestion that Ottawa is indeed their bogey team, no matter what Tommy has to say about it.
Well, I have to confess, I didn't watch this one. I was out in Tilly, Alberta, of all places, that day, but I did watch the highlights. I looked at the stats, and it seems like your classic Cavalry versus Ottawa game. Cavalry did lead in most offensive statistics, things like crosses, corner kicks, entries into the final third. Possession, I think, was 62% to 38%. Shots were 13-8. Expected goals were 1.8 for Cavalry and only 0.87 for Ottawa. But that Ottawa doesn't care about those stats. They defend, they counterattack. Based on the highlights, I couldn't tell if that goal was a counterattack, but it was early. It was only 6 minutes in, and it seems like Ottawa, they go up 1-0. That's all they need. They know that they can win games 1-0, and that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, well, did actually watch the game in its entirety, and the Cavs just looked remarkably flat and right out of the gate. And I'm not completely sure exactly if it was a full-out counterattack when the Cavs had a good chance on their end, but basically the goal seemed to happen out of nowhere, and the Cavs were just sleeping. The thing I was really surprised at is that goal itself didn't seem to snap them out of it. They were still sleepwalking through for probably the next 15 or 20 minutes. And then all of a sudden, I don't know what happened, really snapped to life for the last 15 or 20 minutes of that half. And then they did play better in the second half. But just like we've talked about before, they couldn't completely unlock Ottawa. They've got that defensive system down. So even though they played a lot better, probably for the last 60, 65, they just couldn't figure out a way to get a winner or to get a goal.
Yeah, maybe Meyer Bevan's absence was a part of that. Joe Mason's still kind of coming back from a pretty lengthy injury. Ethan Beckford still looking for his first goal. He came so close with that shot that hit the woodwork in this 75 minutes. This guy,
I thought
he can't buy a goal in the CPL.
I thought that was it, because I saw that happening, and I'm like, because it happened really quickly. It was like a turnaround play, and I'm like, there it is, the woodwork. I was like, oh. One other thing I want to mention was I thought Charlie Trafford played a really solid game, and not to suggest that he hasn't been solid in the past, but I really noticed his performance out there this week. He really seemed like he was really in command of things, even though they didn't get the victory. He really showed really well in this match, and I just thought I would make a point of mentioning that.
So just before we move on, I had a few more things I wanted to mention. So like you mentioned, and like we've talked about before, Ottawa has become a bogey team for Cavalry, and Atletico has now beaten Cavalry in 5 of their last 7 meetings, and Cavalry still haven't won a game at TD Place before. I'm not sure how many times they've traveled there, but until they meet again, we just have to keep calling them Cavalry's bogey team.
I would agree. All right, well, let's talk about the next match, which is Friday. And by the time I think you'll be listening to this, we'll be releasing it Friday morning. So later on this evening at Spruce Meadows, and they're going to face Forge. Yeah, it should be another classic Forge Cavalry matchup. I know Meyer Bevan is still out. His red card suspension was for 2 matches, so he won't be at this one. But yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to this one.
Yeah, me too. It's easy to get excited for a Cavalry versus Forge match, and I had to miss the last time that Forge came to Calgary and these two teams played each other at Spruce Meadows. So I'm very happy that I get to go to this one. And the stakes are pretty high. I mean, we're into that second half of the season, and it's second against third. I believe Forge they have a 2-point lead over Cavalry at the moment, and Cavalry will be trying to leapfrog them. I think, it's going to be tough. Forge, I was looking at their last games, and they were in good form throughout July. They had 3 clean sheets in their 4 games in that month, and only conceded, I believe, 1 goal. And they I think if I'm remembering correctly, they won 3 and they tied 1 in July. So they're coming into this game pretty hot.
Yeah, I fully expect it to be a good match. It seems like these two clubs never really disappoint when they face each other. So should be a good one. Looking forward to seeing it. And I guess we'll report on it next week. Thanks for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can subscribe to the podcast using all the usual podcasting platforms. Head over to our website at yycsoccer.com. There you can find more info about how to subscribe or to leave a question or comment. You can also follow us on Twitter or X or whatever it's called today at YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.